Bernalillo County Commissioners made their second legislative appointment of the summer this week, naming community organizer Kay Bunka as the replacement for Cheryl Williams Stapleton, who resigned in the face of an investigation into financial improprieties involving her job with Albuquerque Public Schools. Now, as best as anyone can recall, Ms. Bunka is the first Asian American woman in the legislature. She says representation is important for New Mexico communities, as she discussed with senior producer Matt Grubbs.
New Representative Kay Bunka, thanks so much for joining us. When we spoke just a couple minutes ago, you said that this all happened very quickly. I know there were people talking to you. Were you able to talk to other people to figure out if the issues you're interested in are the issues that they're interested in?
I've worked in House District 19 for my entire career. I was born in the place. I came back to grow my family there, and having done work that was grounded in community, specifically in the International District and broader Southeast Albuquerque, I feel like I have known those issues for a while now. We've worked on them. I'm still connected with many of the organizations doing organizing work there. So when I think about how the issues are impact the communities in that place, I feel like there is already that strong connection. And, right, we can always learn more, and we can definitely continue to show up to better understand the nuances of what's happening in the day-to-day as well. So.
You said that you're in the process of deciding and finding out what committees you'll be a part of, so that's in the works. Yeah. I think right now when people hear of Albuquerque, they think so much of crime. There is a trend that is concerning. You've spoken before of mental health as a possible solution, or part of one. How does that fit in to what we're seeing right now? What's your ideal in terms of services and systems?
Sure. I think when we think about violence that's happening in our communities, we need to think about some of the structures that play into that. And I do think there are times when we need to rethink about where we're allocating our resources and making sure that we're not committing to solutions that have historically over-policed Black, Indigenous, Asian Pacific Islander, Latinx, other communities of color, LGBTQ plus community. How do we make sure we're really thinking about creative, community-led and community-based and designed solutions that get to the place where we are all safe, that we all feel a sense of community and belongingness, and that we've got some real say into our community. So for us to really think about what are the other solutions, it is that investment in mental health. It is that investment in culturally tailored services that the community in this area does so well. It is also thinking about what are policies that can get to the root causes of issues, such as universal basic income. How can we really give people the support systems that they need so that they can really thrive in our community? So I think to take a holistic approach too is so important when we look at big issues like violence.
And you would see those services come alongside something like what the governor and the speaker have talked about, which is 1,000 new officers who are trained in community-oriented policing. You see those two things coming side by side?
I think there is a place for policing, and I do think the more input we have from communities who live in this place, and I also want to recognize our unhoused neighbors, the closer we're going to get to a solution that works for everybody. So for us to be able to have that input and to say where we need the support, I think that again will be the key to making it work.
We could spend the entire interview on this, of course, but when you say over-policing, are you talking about more police being in a part of town that has a certain segment of the population, resulting in more crimes, resulting in more police, kind of that feedback loop?
I think so. It's how do you disrupt that cycle? And the International District in Southeast Albuquerque already has so many police I don't know if bringing more into it is the exact solution. I think it's part of it, but we again need to think about what is that comprehensive approach that we can take as community, as state, as also city leaders and county leaders, and think about what really makes the most sense for this place.
You enter the legislature at a time when we're doing redistricting, which is a very important role that is oftentimes, I think, maybe overlooked just because it can be incredibly boring too. You're looking at a lot of maps and things like that, but it really counts for representation. How do you feel about the new system where there's a community-based advisory group that will give the legislature its recommendations? What do you feel about that?
I was on the governor's complete count committee when we were going through Census 2020 and making sure everybody was counted in our state, because we know that leads to resources for New Mexico for the next 10 years. So I very much believe in how do you get to that representation, how do you do it accurately, and how do you make sure that you're doing the outreach that's necessary. I think the committee that is set up is a great step in the right direction. I know a lot of community organizers fought to have that established so that there was some sense of input from community that would be directly wrapped into the maps that are created through redistricting. I think too, through the process, there's not like a huge swath of representation even on that committee. Even thinking about Southern New Mexico, is there a voice from there? Some of that is lacking. So I think, again, it's a step in the right direction, and there are also many ways to improve it. So I think with not having full representation on that committee, to make sure, again, how are community voices being inserted into the conversation so that it truly is the ability for communities to be a part of mapping out their communities, the places that they live, and that they feel like they can get the representation that they need.
Would you prefer the independent commission's recommendations to be binding, or at least more incumbent upon the legislature to really prove that those aren't good plans?
I think if they set up this commission with the idea that those considerations would be taken very seriously, I think that next step is making sure we get the right people on that commission, and then to say, and how can we make this more binding so that the recommendations coming from there are really taking into consideration community, and that gets implemented into the mapping.
Okay. If they were to recommend a boundary for House District 19 that didn't include your home, would you support it?
I think the most important thing is that the communities of interest stay together. I think secondary for me personally is the political piece. I think representation matters. I think at the end of the day, this is people's lives, this is their home, and we need to first and foremost have the identity, have the community stay whole, so that they get the representation that they need. I think where representatives live is a part of that equation. People appoint or elect, people that they care about, so that is definitely part of the formula. But, number one priority's gotta be keep the communities together.
You talked about representation. As far as anyone can remember, you'll be the first Asian American woman to be in the legislature.
Yeah.
Why is that important? What does that mean?
New Mexico has always been a multicultural, multilingual state. I think there is this myth that we've got three cultures, really, right? The tricultural myth we talk about and some people embrace. That's never existed. It doesn't help anybody to identify in that way for New Mexico. We really need to have a representative body that reflects the population of the state. For there not to be an Asian American voice in the state legislature at this moment, that was one of the driving reasons that made me say, it's time. And if I want to have a state where my daughter and all New Mexico's children feel like they can see themselves reflected in leadership, then I have to also figure out how can I be a part of that narrative change.
How do you do that and also reach out to the Black community that lost a representative in Representative William Stapleton?
I think it can be a both and conversation, right? Representation for all communities is so critically important. So how do we make sure there is space for all of that, and know too that there is zero Asian representation in the state legislature. So I think it's so critically important that we have all of our communities in that space with the lived experiences that could really evolve the kinds of policies that are being championed at the state level. And we need to make more room for that, and we need to figure out how to do that together.
Representative Kay Bunka, get used to that title, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you.